Srimad Bhagavatam, 4th Canto, Chapter 16, Text 22. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Ayam Mahim Gam Dudhe Diraja
Ayam Mahim Gam Dudhe Diraja
Prajapatir Vritti Kara Prajana Yo Leelayadrin Swasarasa Kotja Mindan Samam Gam Akarod Yatindraha Translation: This king, this protector of the citizens, is an extraordinary king and is equal to the Prajapati demigods. For the living facility of all citizens, he will milk the earth, which is like a cow. Not only that, but he will break the level of the surface of the earth with the pointed ends of his bow, breaking all the hills exactly as King Indra, the heavenly king, breaks mountains with his powerful thunderbolt. You can repeat? This king. This protector of the citizens. Is an extraordinary king. And is equal to the Prajapati demigods. For the living facility of all citizens, he will milk the earth, which is like a cow. Not only that, but he will level the surface of the earth with the pointed ends of his bow, breaking all the hills, exactly as King Indra, the heavenly king, breaks mountains with his powerful thunderbolts. So there's no purport to this text. And so I'm just going to read the next text with its purport, which is a little controversial. Text 23. Vispurjyana jagabham danu swayam yadacharachram avishayam ajao tadanilil yor dishi dishya santo langulamat udyamya yatamagendraha. When the lion travels in the forest with its tail turned upward, all menial animals hide themselves. Similarly, when King Prithu will travel over his kingdom and vibrate the string of his bow, which is made of the horns of goats and bulls and is irresistible in battle, all demoniac rogues and thieves will hide themselves in all directions. Purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. It is very appropriate to compare a powerful king like Prithu to a lion. In India, Kshatriya kings are still called Singh, which means lion. Unless rogues, thieves, and other demoniac people in a state are afraid of the executive head who rules the kingdom with a strong hand, there cannot be peace or prosperity in the state. Thus, it is most regrettable when a woman becomes the executive head instead of a lion-like king. That's the controversial point. In such a situation, the people are considered very unfortunate. Okay. It gave me a very difficult verse to comment on here. So, Om Gana Siddhanta Shah Ganam Jana Shlakaya Chakshu Meditam Gena Tismai Shigure Namaha. Should I talk about that point? Yes. Okay. You're responsible. So, anyway, so first of all, this word Singh, which means lion, it's a typical name in Punjab. That you hear many people by the name of Singh. And previously, the Kshatriyas there were so strong, ferocious, and courageous, they would wrestle lions. I mean, one time, Prabhupada, there's a story, Prabhupada went into someone's house And it was in Punjab. And they had all the different, let's say, heads of animals all over the house. The devotees were shocked. I was just reading this the other day. And this devotee, there's a very nice biography written about Jamuna Devi, one of the great ladies in our Krishna conscious movement. Has anyone read this biography? Very nice. You've read it, isn't it? Wonderful biography. So she was shocked to see all these different heads of animals, the deer. Of course, not the cow. The cow is not killed in Vedic culture. But, deer heads and fox and whatever, lion's head. And this personality said that he had wrestled the lion and killed the lion with his bare hands. Pretty good, isn't it? Also, apart from the people who are called Singh, there's the story of Shripad Madhvacharya, who is one of our great acharyas in the disciplic succession. In fact, we're called Brahma Madhva Gaudiya Sampradaya, who wrestled tigers. Now, the tigers in India are not exactly like the cats you have here in Finland. Little tiny cats. They're, like 2 meters long, or even longer sometimes. I mean, they're as big as cows almost. And they're ferocious. And these Bengali tigers, in fact, I think there's some sports teams by the name of Bengali tigers. So these Bengali tigers, they would go into the villages and basically destroy a whole village and eat the children and the people and everything like that. Ferocious creatures. So one time, Shripad Madhvacharya was walking through the forest with one of his disciples, Satyatirtha, and a tiger attacked Satyatirtha, and Madhvacharya just like separated them with his hands, and the tiger ran away. He didn't kill the tiger. The tiger ran away with the tail between his legs, not upwards like is described here in the verse. So Madhvacharya, of course, is also Vayuputra. Vayuputra means one of the sons of the wind. Does anyone know the other two Vayuputras? Bhima and Hanuman. So they were strong. So he and his disciples had a very unusual ashram. They would engage in wrestling with his disciples. Can you imagine that? Gurudev, what service would you like me to do? Well, could you wrestle with me? And you have to be serious about it. You could just like say, I surrender, Gurudev. And so he always won, of course. And he could jump and fly through the air just like Hanuman. And so many nice things this Madhvacharya had. Anyway, the class is not about Madhvacharya. It's about kings who were like that, so strong. And they would always fight at the front of the battlefield. They wouldn't be like the modern day kings, presidents, prime ministers. Of course, not too many kings nowadays. We're just figureheads, as we described before. Who would sit in a concrete bunker. You know what a concrete bunker is? Like in a bomb shelter or something like that. And in this way, plan out the war. And nowadays, of course, the wars are fought by proxy with these drones. You know what a drone is? No. UAV, unmanned aerial vehicle, where they have these planes with no pilot in them. And there's someone there at the other end of the earth with a computer joystick. You know what a joystick is? A mouse. And he's controlling it, and he's able to see through, that's called first-person view. He's able to see as if he were in the drone, and he focuses on whoever he wants to hit, and he pushes a button, boom, and he kills the person. That's not Kshatriya activity. The Kshatriya would risk his life in order to uphold religious principles. And a Kshatriya would never return from a battle unless he was severely wounded or had won. There's that story that Prabhupada told of one king, and he went out to fight a battle, and he returned without being wounded. He just, I guess, surrendered or something like that. He went back to his castle, and he, I guess, knocked on the door of the castle, or whatever, or the fort, whatever you called it in those days. And his wife wouldn't let him in. Because the women were also like Kshatriya stock. It's not only the men were like that. I mean, I've been in some houses where, people from Punjab, and the women are tough as nails. really in there. And even in the house, sometimes husband and wife, they're just like fighting. Not fighting fists and anything, but they're yelling at each other. I'm just going, oh my God, what's happening? And I asked them, what's wrong? They said, no, this is how we normally interact with each other. This is our loving exchanges. Oh my God. In Bengal, too, sometimes the men yell and scream at each other. That's part of their friendship ritual. So anyway, so this king, back to the story. So the king came back home, knocks on the door. The wife won't let him in. And he says, let me in, Priya. That's how husbands should call their wives. Priya means dear. And she said, you're not my husband. And he said, what do you mean I'm not your husband? I remember getting married to you. My name is so-and-so Singh. And she said, no, my husband would not come back from the battlefield unless he had won or been severely injured or dead. So you're not coming back in the house. And so the poor man, he went out and fought, and he won the battle, and his wife said, now you're my husband. So he came back. So that's Kshatriya. We have to understand, Kshatriya is like courageous, heroic. Of course, the word Kshatriya basically means to protect people. Just like you have the word mantra. Mantra means to liberate the mind. Very few of us understand the word mantra. We have all these different mantras that we recite. We don't know the meaning of them. Just like yesterday, we had one devotee recite the prasadam prayer. Sivira Vijayajna. They said, what does it mean? Said, I don't know. It just means it's time to eat. And I said, no, that's not the meaning of the prasadam prayer. The meaning of the prasadam prayer is that, our senses are difficult to control, they're torturing us, and prasadam helps us conquer the senses. I said, oh, that's the meaning. And he'd been chanting prasadam prayer for 30 years, 40 years. So, the word mantra means to liberate the mind from the entanglement, the conception that we are this body. Because once you're liberated from that conception, you won't experience any of the miseries of the body. The adhyatmic, adhyabodic, adhidaivic miseries. Miseries from other living entities, miseries from the body and mind, or miseries for the material nature. Too cold, too hot. So that's mantra. So Kshatriya, Shat means harm. So Kshatriya, Kshatriya liberates someone from harm by the citizens. He protects and upholds religious principles, protects the Brahmins. That's the Kshatriya's duty. So in order to do that, he has to really be strong, ferocious, courageous, and fight at the front of the battle. That's the Kshatriya. And you see, like Grandfather Bhishma, he was the general, of course, and he was fighting at the head of the army. And that's also why Dhritarashtra really couldn't become a king. Because he was blind. You can't have a blind person fighting at the front of the army. Because he's going to turn in the wrong direction, basically. Can you imagine, a blind general in the front of the army saying, charge, and he's going off backwards. I mean, you can't even figure out which side of the horse is the head if you're blind. That's why the king had to have all his faculties, which means eyes, ears, strength, and everything like that. So Dhritarashtra was unqualified to be a king, but he was really envious, and as a result of that, his children took on that envy, and Duryodhana was also unqualified to be king because he didn't have saintly qualities. He wasn't interested in protecting the citizens. He was interested in exploiting the citizens, and even the charity he gave to the citizens was just to bribe them so they would like him and oppose the Pandavas. He was very charitable. He opened his treasury up and distributed money and everything to the citizens, but just so when it came time to confront the Pandavas, they would like him. So that's the standard in India. You bribe someone so they like you. Right? Anyway, so I guess we should get to the controversial statement here. So Prabhupada says something very heavy here. It is most regrettable when a woman becomes the executive head instead of a lion-like king. No. there's different natures between men and women. I hate to tell you that. You know, it's not politically correct. There's just different natures. And there's different, men have different natures too. I mean, we have a varnashram system. It's not that everything is one. Everybody has a specific psycho-physical nature. Like Brahmin, Kshatriyas, Vaishyas, Shudras. And if you ask someone of a different nature to do service, which is not their nature, even though if they can do it nicely, their mind will be disturbed. For example, let's take the example of myself. I have a nature, I think it's of a Brahmin, when I last checked. I mean, sannyasi should definitely be brahminically inclined. I can do a lot of things. I know how to fix cars, I know how to manage, I know how, know banking and commerce. But if I try to do these things all day long, I go crazy. Like if you ask me to do business or to manage, it's like it becomes a headache. My mind rebels at it. So there's a nature. Although I can do these things, I know about these things. Brahmins are expert. In fact, you have Brahmins who even teach about martial arts. You have Dronacharya, who is teaching the Pandavas how to fight, how to use weapons. But the problem was that he actually fought himself in the battle of Kurukshetra. That was the deviation. So Brahmin can teach different things. Brahmin can teach business. Of course, Prabhupada said there's no need to learn business because business means to buy things at a low price, sell at a high price, and learn how to cheat people. That's a Vaishya. And a Brahmin can teach all these different skills, but a Brahmin is supposed to himself just do Brahminical activities, which means yajan, patan, dana pratigraha. Giving, charity, accepting charity, teaching about worship, teaching the Vedic literatures, etc., and learning, studying. So Dronacharya deviated from his swadharma by fighting in the battle of Kurukshetra. And so did Kripacharya, because they should have just taught and remained silent. But their Brahminical qualities were lost because they had accepted salary and from Duryodhana and company. When a Brahmin accepts salary, he loses his Brahminical qualities. What do I mean? Because when you're accepting a salary, you're dependent on others, then you have to really do what they say. You have to agree with them. Just like I was reading about Korea, North Korea. Anybody who disagrees with Kim Jong-un gets killed. There was even his chief, let's say, his chief of staff just recently got killed. They took out one of these big guns in a tank and shot him to death in front of everybody because he disagreed. So definitely in Korea, there's no room for Brahmins. Because a Brahmin has to be independent-minded and be able to speak. Just like Chanakya Pandit, the famous Brahmin in India who was advising Maharaj Chandragupta, that when he disagreed with the king, he just left. And he never accepted a salary. He lived in a hut, even though he was the most powerful man in India. You know that story? He lived in a hut, in a grass hut. So therefore, when he disagreed with the king didn't like what he was doing. He just left. So that's a Brahmin. So anyway, so there's different qualities. So basically, so here, getting back to the point, which I'm trying to avoid, about, women's qualities. What are women's qualities? Women, at least in traditional society, not in Kali Yuga, are supposed to be supporting the men, supporting the men and as mothers and all those other nice things in society. Now I'm getting myself in trouble. So, and, men are supposed to be the bread earners and doing all that nice stuff. So there's a division of labor in society. Even though the ladies can do things, there's a reason for the division of labor, so that society can function practically and efficiently. like Prabhupada would often comment about women's liberation. He said that, of course, the women's liberation, Prabhupada said, was actually started by the men, women's liberation movement, because the men wanted the women to be liberated so they can enjoy them without having to pay the price. Like Prabhupada would give this quote, when milk is available freely in the marketplace, who will go to the trouble of keeping a cow? Anyway, that's Prabhupada's quote. It's a conservative class. So, normally I'm liberal. So, the whole women's liberation movement was started in that way. So, basically, to have a proper society, this is not discrimination against women, you need to have someone staying at home taking care of the children. And actually, when you don't have people staying at home taking care of the children, a woman or a man or whatever taking care of the children, what happens is that the child doesn't grow up so well balanced, because the children need a full-time caregiver. Nowadays, the system is when the child is like 2 days old, you send them to daycare. Probably not that bad. You send them to daycare, and in what was it, Czechoslovakia, they had this system, the Ceausescu. I don't know if any of you heard about that before, where they would take the children away practically immediately after the child was born. Put the children in cribs. You know what a crib is? Cribs. And then have a tube running through the room, several tubes with little nipples coming down from the tubes. So the children were all connected, just like in a cow milking barn. The children were all just like sitting there in their little cribs and drinking from the tube that was, the tube that was coming down, supplied by pressure from some machine like that. And they didn't really have any human affection. And as a result, there's a whole generation of really dysfunctional people. And even in East Germany, where they did something not quite so radical, that you'll find that people who grew up in East Germany, they're not as functional as the people who grew up in West Germany. This is a generalization. Of course, there's always exceptions to that. Because people need, the more the child is handled when they're young, the more the child develops the brain, intelligence, and functionality in this world. So there's a need for a full-time person who's motherly with the child. And Prabhupada said the more the child has that particular interaction with the mother, the more the child will be free from lust later on in life. Prabhupada said that. Anyway, these are just things that Prabhupada said. I know that no one's going to want to hear my classes after this. So, anyway, so there's a need for different roles in society. That's the point I'm making. And also for fighting, this particular point that's made here, where the king has to be in front of the battle and fight. It's better to have someone who's stronger, able to face the enemy, like that, and fight against the opposing party. And you see nowadays, in certain countries, of course, like in Israel, where they have just as many women in the armed forces as the men, that it's actually quite a dangerous situation, because sometimes the opposing party, they'll kidnap the women, and then they'll threaten the women, and it creates a lot of problems in the war or in the uprising that they're trying to quell. So this is Prabhupada's statement. I mean, we can't argue with Prabhupada's statement. There are divisions in society. It's not that a woman, on the other hand, spiritually, women are equal to men. I want to balance this whole thing. Like Prabhupada actually said that many, many times, that when a woman is Krishna conscious, she's not lesser than a man. She's actually equal. And her association is desirable in order to become Krishna conscious. So that's a different situation. And also, in certain circumstances, a woman can manage a temple too. Because managing a temple doesn't require that you fight with the people, usually. Managing a temple, a woman can engage in management and things like that, but to be in front of the battle is not really appropriate. So these are some of the points that Prabhupada made, and King Prithu was the ideal king. So any questions or comments about these points? Yes? Samradhika.
This is one of the purports which I have like doubts if I distribute knowledge. Because, nowadays in society, there is Angela Merkel, there is Margaret Thatcher, in Finland there was Barry Holland for a long time as the president.
Yeah, you get in trouble here.
Who were like, you have considered kind of okay. And it's more like different skills, not like fighting with physical force nowadays.
Yeah.
And I don't know what would people say if they read it, like if some people think differently about these ladies as leaders and they do this possible, how would you evaluate some present this?
How would you present it? I think ladies can be expert administrators, managers in many different ways, depending on their qualities. Actually, ladies have different varnas too. Like I mentioned in the beginning of the class, there's Kshatriya ladies, there's Vaishya ladies, there's Shudra ladies, there's Brahminical ladies. Well, so ladies have different varnas and they can do different things. But the traditional role of the king would be to actually engage in fighting. So the leaders of society today don't have to engage directly in fighting. Prabhupada was given the traditional role of a leader, a king, or president, or prime minister, or something like that. So, just to appease people who might complain about these particular purports, that certainly ladies can assume roles in society that don't require fighting. Because another point is that sometimes, and most of the times in ministering justice, which Prabhupada mentions here, one has to be very, very, almost cold-hearted. For example, the laws of Manu are very, very strict in many regards. For example, if someone kills someone else, they're to be killed. Or if someone commits child abuse even, they're supposed to be killed as a result of that. And this actually prevents, it's a preventative measure. People are scared of doing anything wrong. In modern society, because people have become a little too soft-hearted, a lot soft-hearted, the criminals are not scared of committing criminal activities because they understand that even if they go to prison, what will happen is they'll get out eventually and be able to continue their criminal activities. And not only that, in prison they'll probably get instructions on how to be a better criminal. That's what usually happens, at least in America. In America, we have more than 1% of the population in prison or jail at any one time. Can you imagine that? 1% of the total population. That's, of course, in America we almost have 300 million people. That means 3 million people in prison at any one time. Because the administration of justice is not being done properly. People are not being protected, and there's so many criminals running around. That's not the 3 million criminals who are in jail is just a small number compared to the total number of criminals in the country. So you need some very strict enforcement. I mean, in India traditionally it was like that. If someone did something heinous, he harmed someone, then they would be taken out of circulation so they couldn't harm anyone else. I mean, that's very strict. So it requires, being really cold-hearted sometimes. Like nowadays, there's so much propaganda against capital punishment. Because they think it's cruel and unusual. But capital punishment alleviates the person from their future karmic reaction. And it also alleviates society from having to deal with the person. So there needs to be some really heavy administration of justice like that. Yeah. So anyway, so your question is, how do we present these things to people in public in Finland or America or anywhere? I mean, there's a lot of things Prabhupada says that are politically incorrect. We have to be careful about presenting certain things in public. I mean, just, that's natural. And we have to become expert enough to explain these things so that people don't get disturbed and reject Krishna consciousness. But ourselves, we understand this is the proper situation of society, proper organization of society. I mean, women have a place, men have a place. And it's not that women are restricted from doing any spiritual activities. Women can be preachers, women can become gurus. On the other hand, you know, I'm extremely liberal. I'm the one who has actually proposed to the GBC that women can become gurus, and I presented certain ladies up to become gurus, and there's many conservative elements in the GBC that have opposed that. And right now it's sort of like in a suspended state. Because on the spiritual platform, there is no difference. But when we're functioning within the system of Varnashram Dharma, and Prabhupada did want Varnashram Dharma institute in the society, there is a difference. I mean, there's certain things I can't do just because of the nature of my body. Like Prabhupada said, if the men and women want to become equal, the men should start giving birth to children, which is pretty impossible. I honestly can't do that. And there's certain things, like I can't do a Kshatriya's duty. I'm not of that nature. It's just not my nature. So everybody should understand they have a certain psychophysical nature. And these are generalizations. Sometimes you will find exceptions. Like even with men and women, I mean, sometimes you find men who are very good at doing women's tasks. There's some men who are very good at designing deity clothes, for example. But if you asked me to design deity clothes, the deities would probably leave. Isn't it? You know, you'd come one morning to the altar and the deities would have a note, you know, we left, no nice clothes for us. So we all have certain talents according to our nature. Yeah.
It's the story when Aswatthama had killed the 5 sons of Draupadi.
Yeah.
Very interesting purpose there about nature of women.
Yeah.
When he was presented before her, you know, when Arjuna came, I killed him.
Yes.
And she was like, no, he's a Brahmana, and he's out, you know, it's interesting. You remember this purpose?
Yeah, I remember the purport.
About this bit about the same.
That Draupadi, she was very soft-hearted. And she said, you know, you can't kill him, even though he's killed her children, because, you know, he's a Brahmin, or the son of a Brahmin, and also his mother is still alive. You know, so was Kripi was his mother's name. His father's name was Kripacharya, then Kripi. Oh, no, actually, the sister, yeah. Kripi was the sister of Kripa. And Dronacharya's son. So she was very soft-hearted. And so Arjuna was presented with the dilemma, and he of not killing him and killing him simultaneously. So basically they cut off the jewel from his forehead. So yes, Prabhupada talks about that, how ladies are generally soft-hearted. So there's different natures, that's all. We have to understand our different natures, our different psychophysical situations, and function accordingly. There's limitations. I mean, I have physical limitations, and I understand them. You know, if someone asks me to run a marathon, I can't do it. If someone asks me to dance, I can't do that. You know, I remember, you know, I know my physical limitations. Like when I was young, my mother sent me to dancing school. And I was the first person to get kicked out of dancing school because I was stepping on all the girls' feet. So that's my physical limitation. I can't do it. Of course, for sannyasis, it's better not to dance. At least like that. So we all, and I can't draw pictures either. You know, we all have physical limitations and mental limitations, so we have to function according to that. Yeah.
I was just thinking about the Prabhupada said also that we should become like Arjuna.
Yeah.
So do we need to have still some Kshatriya qualities?
Prabhupada gave that particular statement, or made that statement, in regard to preaching Krishna consciousness. Preaching Krishna consciousness means we should be ready, both men and women, to go out and fight to spread Krishna consciousness. Not fight with people, but have this like enthusiastic attitude to conquer Maya. Because in Kali Yuga, we're not supposed to be fighting and killing people, but fighting with the demoniac element. And even in regard to women having that attitude, which is interesting, Prabhupada said the women who are preaching should be like the lion on the chase. In other words, they should be like singhas. They should be like lions when they're going out and preaching. Interesting. And a lamb at home. You understand? Lion on the chase, lamb at home. Does that make sense? You know what a lamb is? You know what a lamb. In other words, the home, and the men should also be like that. Men should not be like lions when they come home. They should be lambs too. So that's the point. Preaching, yes, like Arjuna. Prabhupada said we want devotees like Arjuna, not sit-down devotees. Devotees who are going out and fighting courageously to preach Krishna. And both men and women can do that. On the spiritual platform, there's no difference between men and women. They can both execute the same functions. But on the material platform, there's a physical bodily platform. There are differences between us. I mean, we have to admit that. It's not that everybody has the same amount of intelligence, the same amount of strength, the same amount of ability. There's difference. These are generalizations we're making. There's always exceptions to the generalizations. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So any other questions or comments? Kishma Madhav?
Comment? Seems like if the men are doing their duties, then the women can...
Yes. Yeah, we need proper men too. Yeah, the men do their duties. I mean, sometimes the ladies or the men say that they want their wives to be like Sita Devi. And the wife should say, well, I want my husband to be like Lord Ram too. But their husband is like Ram. So how do they expect their wife to be like Sita Devi? Mandodari. Mandodari, she was pretty good. But she was tolerant. She was so tolerant, she had thousands of co-wives who Ravana had kidnapped. So, I mean, anyway, so the men have to act properly too. And one of the reasons that the women want to assume other roles in society that are not natural psychophysically is that the men are not acting properly. They're not protecting the ladies. Because the ladies have to be protected at every stage. That's Vedic system. When they're by the father, by the son, or by the husband. And that's the proper Vedic system. We don't want to change it. Gopinath, you have a question?
Just a comment and sharing some thoughts which I heard from Bhaktivedanta Maharaj about male and female psychology. He said that women can function with emotions and intelligence at the same time, but not separately.
Yeah.
And males can function only separately, either with emotions or intelligence. So when there's a need of intelligence, then women are weak at that point.
I never heard that before. Anyway, I think men can also do a few things. We're not that bad. So I think we can use emotions and intelligence at the same time. I don't think it's just like shifting gears. Oh my God, he's manic depressive. He's in his intelligence state with no emotions. I mean, I practically experienced that when I can use my intelligence, I could also temper it with emotions, and when I'm emotional, I can also temper it with intelligence. So, But physiologically, the men have less interconnections between the two halves of their brains. And the women have more interconnections. So women are more intelligent. So anyway, yeah, Rangadevi.
We have this kind of like interesting history in Finland.
Yes.
That it came to my mind because we had this war, and all the men were sent to the war, and females they were supporting.
Yeah.
So we have this kind of a tradition of a very strong womanhood.
Yeah.
We had to be very independent here, not just only 70 years ago. Not
Right.
So we kind of inherited that kind of style.
Well, that's good. That's good. We're not saying that women shouldn't be strong. They should be strong, but they shouldn't be fighting in the front of the battlefield. That's the only difference.
Yeah.
That's the only difference I'm making.
Yeah.
Women can administer.
Yeah.
Can be ministers in government. They can do so many things. But Prabhupada indicated that the duty of a king in the traditional system was to be at the front of the battlefield. Does that mean I have to stop? I can't refer to the Bhagavatam anymore.
Liberating from the physical weight of that.
It's not so heavy. So that's the only point. Then a traditional system, I mean, first of all, your governmental heads now are not functioning properly, because if they want to be at war, they should be at the front. They would think twice. Like even in Russia, let's say Putin, for example, who has now attacked Ukraine, if he had to go in Ukraine and attack, he wouldn't do it. I mean, that's the whole point. I mean, you couldn't. That's the only thing the ladies can't do or shouldn't do, except, I guess if you have some Amazons or something, but superheroes. But that's the only thing.
Yeah.
That's the only restriction right there. That's why, there's so many wars today, because the leaders are so lacking in courage, they won't go to the front of the battle.
I was more thinking about this kind of feeling of independence.
Yeah.
We have this culture
Oh.
not to be so dependent.
Because, that may be because of certain things that happened historically. And also maybe because the men are not properly protecting. So you have certain societies where this cannot be imposed, and we're not seeking to impose this right now because of historical facts that have occurred, or because of cultural facts that have occurred. I mean, this is theoretically the best situation, but when you come down to the practical situation, you have to adjust things. That's an important point. Yeah.
Adding to the question to what point which Gopinath Prabhu raised, it is said that when we are ruling ourselves, we should rule ourselves with our head, but when we are dealing with others, we should deal with the heart. How do you explain that in men's case?
I think that you have to deal with both. You have to use both. You have to use your heart with yourself too, and you have to use your head with others. I mean, it has to be both things. If you don't use your intelligence and you just use your heart, you can end up with a mess. Because your heart can mislead. Let's say you're dealing with others. Or let's say there's a heart. Okay, here's your heart. And you just get real sentimental with others. I mean, let's say, not you, but let's say someone, theoretically, they fall in love, the heart. Valentine's Day, Cupid. So they just fall in love without realizing, let's say a woman falls in love with a man, without realizing he can't make a living. He's just a bum. Because sometimes people fall in love. It's described when you fall in love, it has the same effect on the brain as taking cocaine. You may not know that. In other words, one gets so bewildered they lose their sense of discrimination. So, is that good? To lose your sense of discrimination? Answer. No. So you have to use your intelligence when dealing with others. Like if I just use my emotions, let's say Gopinath does something wrong, which never happens. But let's say Gopinath does something wrong, and my emotions tell me, scream at him. But my intelligence tells me that will have an adverse effect. Better I just softly tell him, would you rather do it another way? Even though my emotions say, pick him up by the scruff of his neck and yell at him. So emotions, in dealing with others, if we just use emotions, we're going to get in trouble. Either one way or the other. So you have to temper emotions with the intelligence and temper the intelligence with the emotions.
When we're using discrimination, most of people misuse the term that you are not being humble.
You're not being humble.
Yeah.
So, what's the question?
The discrimination again is again misinterpreted in most of the situations. Rather, most of people don't even use the word discretion when it comes to being humble, and they mislead the term. And being humble means avoiding all the situations.
Yeah, anyway, people don't know what humility is. Humility basically means to accept Krishna's direction rather than your own particular understanding. Like, you can be humble and be yelling at someone. Or you can be soft and be puffed up. Because you're thinking of your own, you're taking your own intelligence is more important than Krishna's direction.
Same as what Bhagavad Gita, Krishna is telling Arjuna, same way. That you are being emotional.
Yeah. Well, he said, you're a Kshatriya, you're being emotional. And so you should control that with intelligence. So emotions and intelligence are both required. Anyway, so to end up this controversial discussion, the only restriction I would put is the women shouldn't be at the front of the battlefield. But they can do everything else. And in certain situations where you have, like the men are away fighting, then the women have to become strong. Even in World War II, it happened in America too. The men were all away fighting. Actually, they were fighting in Europe for you. But they were all fighting, and the women had to go to the factories and do everything and be independent. And that's an exceptional situation. In exceptional situations, people can assume different roles in society. But under normal circumstances, it's nice to have certain prescribed rules in society. It's just nice. I mean, it's just, it orders society in that way. Any other questions or comments or arguments or problems? Gopinath? Okay, I think we should end class. All glory is to His divine grace. Srila Prabhupada, Ki Jai.